We're going to be moving into the next set in a moment. I'd like to welcome to the digital stage Mark Campbell. Mark Campbell is also known as DJ Grumps. He's the founder of Northside Hip Hop Archive, a DJ, a curator, and also a scholar. As a co-founder at the Bigger Than Hip Hop show at CHRY 105.5 FM, Mark has DJ'd on and hosted the show from 1997 to 2015 and served as a member of the board at the Ontario Arts Council from 2015 to 2018. As a scholar, Mark has been published widely with essays appearing in the Southern Journal of Canadian Studies, Critical Studies in Improvisation, Souls, a critical journal of Black politics, Culture and Society, and the CLR Journal of Caribbean Ideas. His co-edited collection, We Still Here, Hip Hop North of the 49th Parallel, is set to be launched fall 2020 by McGill Queen's Press. He'll be spinning a set of Canadian hip-hop live in just a moment. During his set, you will also get a chance to see some archival footage and promotional material from hip-hop artists past and present.
Strictly for the head and the chest. Strictly for the head and the chest. Strictly for the head and the chest. Strictly for the head.
We testify that we will teach the people to beat the lethal evil, clogging our hearts and making us evil. So, I'm glad you made it, happy waited to be elated. Nowadays, our music is being content. Coming to rap, running and back, we're fun in the track, stunning the whack, efficient for someone to slack. Pay respect to the roots of this music if you can. Follow the principles and don't even use it because first or the spurts, a burst or the burst, the worst will curse the people of earth that ain't even feeding your third verse. Sings first, I prioritize and let go mental missiles that whistle cross enemy lines to explode.
Yeah, told ya, I tried to show ya that when Earth got that shit in a row, it'll never be sober, bro, it's over. Grab your four-leaf clover, Niggas gonna need some luck to roll these boulders over straight. With rhymes more diesel than Goldberg shoulders, making these rookies salute to the older soldiers. Yeah, these straight veterans with countless stripes, down to get down tonight. Rugged like all-terrain mountain bike. Well, most of these rookies just sound alike, with no skills, sounding like impressions found a mic. But didn't have the slightest clue on how to rock it right. Put me in qualities to show you how to rock tonight. And tracks is gonna show y'all DJs how to cut tonight. So what's up? Strictly for the head and listen. 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 Strictly for the head and listen.
We're coming back to pack, sack, back, stack the blacks and milk, a gold per hack. And yo, we rap, sicker simply to make the track bigger. The rap,
Mr. Grumpy.
I cut like a surgeon, cut like a pan. Laser mind so precise when I ride a slice spread. Stay sublime, you don't want me to shine my bald head. Say goodbye to the player inside, it's all dead. Chase the vibe when before I used to have it called man. Give a try, but the feeling inside is all gray. Great Defying is larger in size, time in all shapes. And besides all things, I no longer feel the same. Change the game, but to me it's no game I don't play. I don't fuck around, it's real what my sound convey. I'm bound to this even after my lungs decay. I found something for the future. How hip-hop is made. Roll the spot, hilltop, the scar side all day. The only thing that made me feel like I have something to say, that will listen when I'm talking instead of walking away. I gave it all I ever had, I never once said nay. I never gave a fuck whether or not on the gloomiest day. I would still rock the mic even if no one came. I would still be on the train even with no spray paint. We would still stay in break after the shots made way. We embody the meaning, we're godly with gold slang. The original B-boy, dig it, rejoice the name. Dig it, rejoice the name. Dig it, rejoice the name. I can feel it in the air, I feel it everywhere. I used to feel it more, now the feeling isn't there. I can feel it in the air, I feel it everywhere. I used to feel it more, now the feeling isn't there. I can feel it in the air, I feel it everywhere. I used to feel it more, now the feeling isn't there. I can feel it in the air, I feel it everywhere. I used to feel it more, now the feeling isn't there. My mission in life is to keep it raw and filthy. Believe it, y'all. We live it. You see the scar, we give it. Receive the ball. The sickness is permanent. Get with it. Go seek your cause. This is we teach them all. Effective so we can roar. Envision a peace for all. In his the soul, they did it to lead us towards
ticks on through the early morning breaks of dawn. I'm an emperor whose empire crushes the poem. I gave birth to a novel scene. Still in the green, blow out your smoke screen. So nigga freeze, cause it's MC in every degree. Can't have a punk spilling head cheese. Socrates, a felon. In this rap game, rebelling and rock stadiums like Van Halen or Bruce Springsteen. What is war good for, my nigga? Even when cash rules, you still lose, my nigga. Quoting the words of a shotty, where who is becomes who was and who could have been will never be somebody. All I want's a green in my jeans. The earth is mean, so I plot schemes. Wild for the night, fuck being polite, my nigga. You're drowning in shit creek without a fight. What, some more psych shit? You want a battle? Touch the mic and see how close you might get. Or bust your mental flick and send you back to your dimension of whackness. Doors block and end with a backflip. So then the beat becomes shank. Let the fat woman scream and ain't over till I finish my skank. Nigga, call me for the time. Call me for the time. The time runs out. Then rough like you will get turned down. Then if you look at my chicken, then nigga, you will lose no. The time runs out. I believe everything happens for a reason. What's meant to be is meant to be. I guess it's just our destiny. Place value on relationships, cause ain't no such thing as coincidence. What is meant to be is meant to be. I guess it's just our destiny. Looking back in reflection on my life's progression, I see many blessings and many lessons, many confessions. Cause what I did needed correction. Forgive me for my imperfection. Upwards is coming up seeking direction. Yeah, a kid just coming up seeking affection. Hoping to make the right connection and trying to make the right impression. Although I heeded my parents' suggestions, I took it and needed every answer they gave to my questions. Just straight from second guessing. Looking back, I see times of depression. Emotional suppression only led out with aggression. Lyrical suppression only led out intercession. Stressing to make this a profession, eternally questioning. I went through confusion due to my apprehension, but we got protection. I moved on through the congestion. I had too many misconceptions, I switched my perception. I had too many confrontations, now I see concession. Yeah, they change all the colors of the seasons. I believe everything happens for a reason. What is meant to be is meant to be. I guess it's just our destiny. Place value on relationships, cause ain't no such thing as coincidence. What is meant to be is meant to be. I guess it's just our destiny. Time flies, things change, people die, people age. Through the odds it's strange, how certain things remain the same. You still got us in shackles and chains. Slave to the system, subliminal bondage of the brain. Whether you're an architect, doctor, push cocaine, you're still caught up in that game. They got rappers dying for fame, for bad aim, or worse yet, bad name. We blame the media because they publish pain. That's pump fear to the people and we keep them tame. Either in jail, insane, or found slain. I'm here to ensure we hear the laughter again, cause I'm sure the sun rise after the rain. It's just us, we gotta take it in our own hands. The righteous will never fall to the wicked man. I'll realize and testify that it's God's plan. Everything happens for a reason. I overstand. Yeah, they change all the colors of the seasons. I believe everything happens for a reason. What is meant to be is meant to be. I guess it's just our destiny. Place value on relationships, cause ain't no such thing as coincidence. What is meant to be is meant to be. I guess it's just our destiny. It's safe to say, 80% of youth today pay no homage to the many that have paved the way. Slaves to fate, karma gon' make the pay. The great escape, long for a day to day. They can't debate, love hate what the stations play. The game's been changed, the money has been made this way. I'm hungry, you gotta feed y'all, that's what some say. So set a place for them to eat, just in case they stay. Welcome, it's called Grimace Love, a.k.a. Put stone the MC, sending the flame their way. The light source for a brighter day is what I'm here to pray, and I ain't never gonna stop. Go take you to a place that I know. Chips, no drink a hydro. Can't forget this. You're the spot. Yeah. I'll take you from this troubled earth to
Mr. Grumpy.
Your body, I'll take you from the stroller to a place like the Cacophony. Where the atmosphere's clear, just relax, just release lay back and let your mind free. Come on,
Significantly, we can get people to see the vision we see. Communicate easily, especially when the isms in me. Check out the imagery, niggas display it vividly. We come from planet Earth where there's no prejudice or bigotry.
this is a new way of thinking with new philosophies, linking our hope for how it ought to be. We've established a better system where the people live properly, changing impossible to probably.
It's flow mobility, flow mo memory. Track singing on the track, stone cold killing me. Cold note melody, no cold, no felony. Poor folk energy, the monoflow pedigree.
Secure a reservation for your tickets to glide. These words you can stick it aside, cause once we make it there, feel that it's so sacred, you should take it in stride. No need to fake it, we can make it a vibe. So come on and ride. This play, planet Earth. Yeah, come on and ride. This play, planet Earth. Come on and ride. This play, planet Earth. Yeah, come on and ride. This play, planet Earth. Out life.
If I feel down, everything's alright. I separate what I hate from the shit that I like. It's something's blocking the way and screening my sight. Shit I do with my crew, bring out the sunlight. It's on me. If I feel down, everything's alright. I separate what I hate from the shit that I like. It's something's blocking the way and screening my sight. Shit I do with my crew, bring out the sunlight. It's on me. If I feel down, everything's alright. I separate what I hate from the shit that I like. It's something's blocking the way and screening my sight. Shit I do with my crew will bring out the sunlight. Sunlight, smacking mics, bright lights, a dim hype type of right. Just begin to feel it when I spin like tops, props collect. Rhymes eject, techniques are thrown, minds respect, top notch. I'm ass a crotch till I shoot blanks and still run pranks and yanks gangs with banks without saying thanks. You all know, except the swell guys who take lies and wear ties in the right size canines. I wouldn't buy your whole fries. I hear too much lies, they really don't realize I'm wise with these eyes. Speaking of eyes, my eyes have been seeing this belief in these bros without no Caribbean background. And still busting slang that's Jamaican. I'm not Jamaican, but at least the first generation. Canadian when I send the pen to the pad, I might lose a friend. But in the end, you'll know what I say or relate is fact. It's like that. See why you're not taking this crap. If I feel down, everything's alright. I separate what I hate from the shit that I like. It's something blocking the way and screening my sight. I do it, my crew will bring out the sunlight. If I feel down, everything's alright. I separate what I hate from the that I like. Yo, beats give me vibes give me rhymes. Rhymes that my brain talk, ain't talk about who's talk. This is my talk when they let me know.
Get back, just to get back to when they get back to business, man. Back to give them what they're missing, yeah. Soul power infinite, go, I was ripping it. White knuckle gripping it, buckle up. We going distances they never thought existed when I be delivering. Ripping this, rhyme pattern, time travel, futuristic. Get back, just to get back to when they get back to business, man. Back to give them what they're missing, yeah. Soul power infinite, go, I was ripping it. White knuckle gripping it, buckle up. We go on distances they never thought existed when I be delivering. Ripping this, rhyme pattern, time travel, futuristic primitive. Boom back, boom box, microchips, gigs and hits. Boy, I ain't been so the world stops spinning and the sun stops. Man, and the wheels fall off. Check engine light flickering. Between North York and Pickering. We've been in idiots thinking we gon' stay inconspicuous. Writings on the wall, y'all just a little wreck. I'm on my hop, get hip to this, or get hit by this. Rip by one, monolith, biggest clip, yep, still kicking it with grim in them. So blitzing this, what it is, I know it's been a bit, but I'm here, back in this trick, like it's one of my women. We need to dig into them. It's almost intimate, pinning it, flipping it, turning it, twisting it, breaking it down, make you say, ow, turn it up loud. When I spit loud, wait, hold up now. Baby, out that cigarette. I ain't finished yet. Bringing it continuous, rigorous. Game cut, soap, slip, racing. It's got you be killing it. Taking no prisoners. Stockholm syndrome, radio listeners. Internet simpletons. I hear nothing but the music. Your opinions, wordsmiths and wizard man. Curse you with the gift for this. Riddling with riddles and until they need riddling. Call and the grammar. Call it the quickening. 2 fingers in the air.
Summer take us to get you. Now I gotta do what I have to. Sick of me tired of fed up with you. Born with us. Well, I don't know, see me come make grind and ting. Don't say nothing is a silent sting. Not even bother with this smiling thing. We not in a born with us. Some no fire, I mean. On them around them. That roses, guns and roses.
Coming like we're done tonight, running like rock to the dumb inside. We're running right, deep tight like knocks. So one in flight, this right. The proof, son is. Yo, wait. See the no way we get back in the boom private corridor chamber, anti-back turn free. So you the master, come visit me. Right to facility, play through black, secure quarantine. I hold my own, get this done, been authentic, bun clone. So I pace when I write rhymes and roll my home. To the last of the book down and close my poem. If you ain't talking moves, man, one can't hear it. The 2 locks of nonsense to set up my spirit. Let's move. Don't worry, watch who's using the grass, moving like if it's something to prove. Tonight, life need a few brand new pair of shoes. Sometimes getting bored of the things I'm in the room. Emmanuel don't reach spots, but city needs stuff on top of the child support. Believe it's not rough. Now this one up in the court, bustle on rap money, and my soul can't slim like bone. It's not funny. But now it's time to lock it off. Leave behind the straight face and right rhymes. Here we go again.
I try, so much time I try just to get through. Now I gotta do what I have to. Sick of me tired of fed up with you.
What do I not know with them boy there?
Well, I don't know, see me come make grind and ting. Don't say nothing is a silence.
Word.
Not even one of this man and thing.
When I ain't on a big smell, done with that. You mean work, we are work. Stress and pressure, we are pressure them. Why you okay? Me want to take it to them for the second verse. Come in.
Yo, direction, guidance, strength in alliance, bond unbreakable, loud when we're silent, struggle in defiance. Our ancestors through bloodline when against the pain and the violence. Trust beyond dust locked deep in the iris, guided from the blaze in the worldwide virus. Soul connection, perfection, blessed with the inner sight, day and night she passed deception. From the waist heights protection, pray for correction, steadily blessing, peace need direction. Hold them, we love them, honor, we love them. Struggle, we love them, Jana, we love them. We're descended, unthinkable strength is in you. Carried in our genes, some of the people have been through. Emmanuel tonight, need time and day, stay strong. Like nothing can touch me in the way.
Try, so much time I try just to get through. Now I gotta do what I have to. Sick of me tired of fed up with you.
Yeah, but with the foolishness, man.
I don't know, see me come make grind and ting. Don't say nothing is a silence thing. Not even bother with this smiling thing.
Yeah. Now, before I could rap, there was straight rock in my box. Quiet riots, English tiger would drop. Yo, and then came Run, DMC and them rock. The bells were LL and I got into hip hop. See my Now, before I could rap, there was straight rock in my box. Quiet riots, English tiger would drop. Yo, and then came Run, DMC and them rock. The bells were LL and I got into hip hop. See my roller VB, he was the dude on the block. Just a sucker MCs with all the lines to take down. And getting pop from them dudes and would say, yo, down. You go rap like you one of them, even if it's on the spot. Now, before I could rap, there was straight rock in my box. Quiet riots, English tiger would drop. Yo, and then came Run, DMC and them rock. The bells were LL and I got into hip hop. See my rollie BB, he was the dude on block. Just the sucker CCs, all the long getting pop from them dudes and they would say, you rap like your brother, them next so I picked up them way, that was the birth of pop. People came to my hole to test the skills that I ran with critical stat, I ran with critical shit, yo, we ran around John Paul like the sensation, yo, carrying on my clique with it, every day, limb back, trick, some class-ish, don't know me, don't confuse me for no sucker MC, yo, CAC,
Thank you, Mark Campbell, a.k.a. DJ Grumps. In just a moment, he will now present his talk titled DJs Defying Algorithms, sharing his experience dealing with the way that DJs must confront the digital sphere at this time.
talk? All right. Okay, so welcome everyone. My talk today is called DJs Defying Algorithms. And what I did to start off is I really presented the first 20 minutes. I was talking about or showing or demonstrating on the turntables one of the phenomenons that are really sort of blown up since COVID started, and that was the ways in which DJs have taken to social media platforms like Twitch, like Instagram, like Facebook Live, like YouTube, to find ways to continue their art form and continue sort of the business of and the culture of DJing. Now, what I did, one of the things that I engaged in was developing a Canada-wide event in which DJs from different cities in Canada played local music. And what I find, the reason why today's talk is called DJs Defying Algorithms is that, you know, with the power of social media platforms and all of their algorithms, they find different ways to ensure that they get the music that they want to you. And, you know, there has been the conversation of, is the DJ dead, the playlist versus the mixtape, etc. And what I wanted to do with this series and what I've done today is I selected 20 minutes worth of songs from Scarborough alone that wouldn't necessarily be something that you could find on a social media platform. A lot of these songs are ripped directly from vinyl. I'm playing them through MP3s now and waveforms, but they are, you know, essentially they are published on vinyl. They're produced and sent out in analog ways and dating all the way back to maybe 91 or 92. Some of the tracks I was playing where really captures a moment when DJs had the opportunity and were sort of the tastemakers, in which they helped have a decision and not necessarily powerful corporations over what songs were hot, what songs got played, what songs are popular, etc. So the idea here is to think about a couple questions, you know, as an artist and musician that would use the affordances of digital platforms. What is really at stake when media platforms can decide and promote particular songs while others, particularly things that aren't digitally born, disappear, right? And what happens to not just the music but the culture around it? So a lot of the things I was doing, you know, some might consider those old school DJ tricks, which now get built directly into the interface of a lot of digital technologies. Those are a bunch of learnings from our communities of learning back in the 80s and 90s, when you would have to learn how to DJ from someone else. I incorporated those into the set to capture the ways in which DJing, and especially the live streaming of DJing, doesn't necessarily fall into the same modalities of the kind of programmatic content that you get from you know, a Spotify playlist or from iTunes or something like that. What DJs do, and what I did with this event called Live from the Crates across the country in cities like Winnipeg, Montreal, Ottawa, we worked with different DJs to play the B-sides of records, to play the underappreciated or the unknown records that wouldn't make it onto Spotify, that wouldn't get on lists, but these songs were important in terms of the influence that they created in their local context, in their local scene. And these songs were also important because they sometimes, like the last song that I played was called Breath Control by Shaw Claire. And, you know, one of the reasons why I played it is because it's really a history of him coming up in the local hip hop scene in Scarborough in the early 90s and the mid 90s. And he names one of the high schools that I went to. He talks about the local breakdancing crews, intricate and bag of tricks, battling at every scene. And all of these oral histories have disappeared in a sense from the public record. They're still embodied in lots of the OGs and the architects that are still out there in hip hop. But I played it because it it wasn't a tune that was necessarily charting. It's not something that I haven't looked for it on Spotify, but it's, you know, these songs that might have been produced in 96, 97, 98 and distributed on vinyl in locally in Toronto aren't necessarily accessible to us, even though we are told with certain platforms, you know, have access to 50,000 songs. You know, the question is which songs and when, and what happens to the narratives of those songs that are analog born, that DJs would have played 20 years ago, that an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old that wasn't in Scarborough in the 1990s wouldn't have access to. What happens to those kinds of songs? So my set was really about thinking about how DJs can defy algorithms and how they can push back against the hegemony of digital culture and media platforms that, once, you know, on one side, they're telling us how much freedoms we have and how wonderful life can be if you can subscribe to their $10 a month plan, that you can have thousands of songs in your pocket. But on the other side, what gets lost, or what we don't really appreciate, is the ways that DJs taste make and DJs are able to dig into you know, their record crates and find songs that speak to a local context, right? The part, you know, there is a part about the local context that gets lost in digital culture, and the way in which digital culture gets taken up as the next best thing since sliced bread. But there's, you know, there's a local context in which these songs that I was playing tracks from groups like Earth, Monolith, Grimace Love, YOK. These people, these artists really struggled in the 90s to come out independently, to press their own vinyl, to animate a local hip hop scene that we now see is global around the world, and we see the benefits of it years later. But the art that these artists produced during those very difficult times of spending thousands of dollars to print vinyl gets lost in the moment in which we, you know, accept that streaming platforms and digital media platforms are the ideal source to get at music these days. And you know, I'm happy to see some of the legendary DJs out there like Jazzy Jeff, who had his lunchtime noon mix yesterday, and Carl Cox, and some of these other DJs that are still out there doing live streams and providing a level of diversification to what audiences can hear, particularly during the pandemic. But also, you know, speaking back to, in a sense, the ways in which algorithms are trying to program, not just capture data and read what it is, what we like and our preferences, but also programming what we get access to. So if you've ever tried to listen to one particular song on Spotify without having an account, you know, you may get that song, you may not get that song, but the next song that's you know, queued up for you to listen to is something that's not decided by you, and it's decided by a platform and the folks that are involved in promoting that particular song from a particular agency or record label, right? So that's really what the set was about. If I was to go back through the playlist, I mean, there were songs in here that I played that, you know, people may have not heard for a long, long time, like YOK's Footloose. It was the song I played just before Choclair's Breath Control, which I should mention. Choclair's Breath Control, not only does it tell you this sort of historical and oral history account of his come up in Scarborough hip hop, but it's also an ode to Boogie Down Productions. And why are they significant? You know, they're significant because they were one of the first crews to come to Canada and to praise the Toronto scene, the local Toronto scene. So they would have been down with Ron Nelson, down with the Fantastic Voyage. They were down with Michi Me when she came out. And, you know, it was an important tribute, I think, that Choclair would look back and honor the song by redoing the song called Breath Control. But the song before that I played was YOK's Footloose. And it was featuring Tasha Roses. Now, it came out in the middle of the 2000s, around 2005 or 6, and probably a little bit later than that. But one of the reasons why I played it is Tasha Roses is from Scarborough. She's not a hip-hop DJ. She's a sound system. So she plays reggae music globally, and it has, you know, international accolades, and someone that has represented Scarborough well. She's on YOK's track on Footloose. And it was, to me, one of the best records that came out of Toronto that really didn't get supported by radio. Outside of Flow 93.5, it didn't really get supported on radio in any kind of commercial sense. And I pulled it out just to demonstrate the kind of quality of music that came out of Scarborough at a time when, just like today, where infrastructure is lacking in the record industry. And my inclusion of that is to highlight and signify the importance of community over industry, because there are lots of DJs, and I got a shout out. Musically Insane, who would have been one of the DJs playing this on radio when it first came out, making sure that we honor the kinds of relationships we have in community, right? And DJs were important in that sense, where we weren't just playing records on radio, and it wasn't just about satisfying an audience, but we were also building audiences by, interviewing artists on radio shows, manning the turntables on, getting on and supporting the artists on stage, backing up the artists at their live shows. And, in the case of many DJs, especially DJs that came out of Scarborough, and I'll mention Musically Insane again, they started record labels and started pressing vinyl from an era which, one could think of the mid to late 90s as a kind of an era that was in which hip hop was flourishing in the city of Toronto. There were lots of independent record companies, record labels, that were run by DJs, that were run by artists that have now disappeared, but they are largely responsible for the printing and distribution of an era of music in which you can't necessarily find that music on anywhere on the internet, or you don't find it promoted on music platforms. So part of the whole, this idea of what I'm, suggesting is DJs defying algorithms is not just thinking about our song selection and the access to music that we provide, but it's also that connection between the artist and the artist development. So there are many DJs in the city of Toronto that that can be credited with helping to build the careers of hip hop artists that come out of Toronto. And I would actually add someone like Master T on Munch Music, who was part of the soft infrastructure that helped build a hip hop community to the point where new generations, after 2006, new generations of hip hop artists would come out of Toronto and be very proud that they came from Toronto, at a time where, any day of the week you could turn on commercial radio or you could turn on college radio and you would be able to hear a live, mixed, open format DJ'd radio show that featured hip hop. And a lot of times it would also feature local hip hop from Toronto. So these are some of the things that I'm trying to shine a light on in terms of the creativity and the role of the DJ in not just documenting and helping develop the industry, but also in providing a plethora of choices and providing an opportunity for people to think outside of, listen outside of the power of these platforms, or outside of the corporate designed infrastructure for engagement for audiences. Some other songs in the playlist that I want to shout out. There was a song that featured a James Brown sample, and it was a James Brown song really just flipped on its back. It was done by Landscape, who's a producer for a group called Monolith, the Mighty Monolith out of Scarborough. And that was a song featuring Peter Parker, just called Parker. And what I love about that track is it just reminds us of the kind of ingenuity that hip hop brought in terms of music creation through the act of sampling and through some of the more ingenious ways of flipping a sample to create a brand new song, which, isn't just about copyright violation, but it's also about honoring and inspiration, right? And honoring some of the artists like James Brown that have been absolutely essential to the development of hip hop. Some of the other songs that I played a song called Destiny from an artist called Grimace Love. I think it's important to shout out on the playlist the names of some of the artists and the songs that I played, so that I can, big those guys up, because they were creating this music and still are creating this music very much under the radar. His song Destiny was one of those songs that really spoke to me when it came out. And it is about it, you know, in the song he says, I'm just a young man out here trying to find my purpose, right? Just trying to find, you know, a reasonable and sensible way to live in this world. It was one of the things that I loved about hip hop is just speaking that truth. When the truth is spoken, speaking the truth to power and speaking about one's own life. I played Che Uno, big shouts out to Che Uno, The Feeling, which Che Uno's catalog is huge, and he was a member of my radio show back in the day, the Bigger Than Hip Hop show. I played The Feeling because, you know, that was one of the songs that really got at the interiority of being a hip hop artist, and loving the culture, loving every aspect of graffiti and every aspect of breakdancing and every aspect of DJs cutting and rhyming. And shout out to Uno on that one, because to me, he's one of those, the pinnacle of hip hop in terms of, you know, engaging in all the elements. He's a trained graphic designer, but does everything, including writing and rhyming and DJing on the show. So big shout out to that. That was The Feeling that we played. I started off with a song called Strictly for the Heads from a crew called Earth. Instinctive Reaction to Struggle is the acronym, and that was one of the ones that I started to set off, because it really was about trying to set the scene for what is hip hop and what is the culture of hip hop. And I wanted to honor them by playing Strictly for the Heads, which is one of my favorite tracks from them. So that is, to me, I quickly ran down the tracks. I missed one. I had a track from Earth again called Tracks Lament, which is probably one of the most beautiful, laid-back kinds of songs that came out of any kind of Scarborough representatives that I included in the set. And there is so much that I did not get a chance to include in the set. I included YOK Sunlight, which was a beautiful video shot over the Scarborough Bluffs, but more important, it was, you know, one of these introspective and reflective songs about representing your culture and coming up in Toronto at the time that we came up in the 90s. And, you know, the last thing I want to say, I went through my playlist. I believe I got all the songs in the playlist, but I didn't write any of them down. We kind of just went through them. What I will say sort of as my closing comment and closing remarks is just thinking about, you know, how the relationship between the analog and the digital, and the relationship between, you know, power and multi-platform realities, multimedia, multi-social media platforms and streaming services, and the relationship between what we do as consumers, as fans, and as artists, and the ways that we can disrupt some of the normalized ways in which maybe we might experience music. Luckily, COVID has given an opportunity to come back to these turntables and shoot a video or live stream your video for the world to see what, you know, these are the kinds of musics that still matter, and that have, they aren't necessarily just a nostalgic trip down memory lane, but engaging with them and taking them seriously as historical artifacts, as works of art, also allow you then to start asking different kinds of questions about what culture and what music looks like today, as we live in the age of machine learning, and we live in the age of algorithmic muscle, and we live in an age of subscription services and streaming. This kind of not so nostalgic DJ set and this kind of trip down memory lane is also about disrupting the moment, disrupting the present, and making sure that we remain agents of the culture that we are consuming, and the culture that we're participating in, and the cultures that we built. Right. So that's pretty much my talk for today. And I want to thank the Layton Chair for having me on today.